All right, we've got some big news to get to today. Let's start with what the liberal left is saying about Ukraine, North Korea, and we're going to talk about how this war in Ukraine ends tonight. It ends with Putin being taken out. That's what the liberal left is telling us over the weekend and a past few days. Eradicated will be the leader of Russia. That's the only way that this war ends, according to leftists. And by the way, remember years ago, like when you were a leftist, if you were part of the Obama, part of the Clinton campaign, Clinton team, you were vehemently anti-war. That's what you ran on. You were anti-nuclear. This was like part of your platform. Like, we don't support these wars. Right. Now they've become
Obama
literally
was
the
called
party
the
of
peace
war.
Candidate.
Right. He won a Nobel Peace Prize for what?
Correct.
For killing innocent people.
And some of the rhetoric
strikes
around against Hillary Clinton was that she would be too soft to go to war or to use nuclear weapons.
Right, so she had to really ramp up her, prove to people that she was happy to use nuclear weapons. So this is your Democratic Party right now if you live in the United States. And it doesn't matter, these are also the leftist policies throughout Europe right now. So wherever you are in the world, let us know here in the chat tonight where you're joining us. So that's the focus, right? Whoever is going to carve up Russia and break it down, take out Vladimir Putin, depose him as a leader. That's the goal. Of course, they haven't thought through the idea who's going to take care of these 6,000 nuclear weapons that Putin has under his arsenal. Who's going to take care of those while NATO is busy carving up Russia? So that's what they want. That's their plan. Meanwhile, Donald Trump, Colonel McGregor say that that's insane. Even Elon Musk. Those are basically like the three people that are even calling for peace. Isn't it crazy? A former president, a former colonel, and a guy that makes electric cars.
And a few, academics who get kicked off the air.
Oh, and Noam Chomsky, too. That's true.
And Roger Waters.
Yeah.
All these fringe characters.
I'm just talking about Americans. I'm just talking about Americans on that side, right?
I think Clayton Morris is, too.
Oh, yeah, we are here. But
he's a friend of mine.
We don't have the gravitas. We don't have the gravitas of Elon Musk, I guess. This is what Western leaders are calling for right now is peace. These three people, that's it. Meanwhile, we've got North Korea firing missiles over Japan. Is China testing the waters before an invasion of Taiwan, using North Korea as sort of their dog in this. There's a lot of speculation that that's exactly what China is doing, using North Korea, testing the waters on this. But let's start with Russia on this. Vladimir Putin makes it official today by signing the annexation documents. And get ready for all hell to break loose. He spent hours. He went through 400 pages and had to sign 400 pages of annexation documents to bring in the 4 regions of the Donbass. And look how the New York Times, look at this headline. Putin signs annexation laws, plowing ahead with a parallel reality as Russia loses ground in Ukraine. So the Western media continues to say that this is some sort of alternative reality, like a bizarro world, and pretending that these people somehow didn't vote to leave Ukraine.
And have not been trying to do just that since 2014.
Yeah, or earlier, by the way. I'm going to show you some history here in a second that goes back decades before that. But this is the New York Times. They can't even really pass as journalism anymore. Like you were talking about CBS. It's like how far these old stalwarts of journalism have fallen. Here's the lead paragraph from the New York Times just a few hours ago. President Vladimir Putin signed more than 400 pages of legislation annexing 4 Ukrainian regions, the Kremlin said on Wednesday, forging ahead with a parallel reality in which Russia pretends to exercise sovereignty over thousands of square miles of territory that its military does not actually control. This is the New York Times.
But the New York Times admitted to us that Russia did control these regions as recently as, I want to say, March or April.
Yes.
So they're admitting that Russia is losing ground to Ukrainian advances, but not this much ground.
No, and even Russian media is saying that as well. That yes, Ukraine has gained some territory back in the Donbass region. That's absolutely the case. But what's not the case is that they are not in control of these 4 regions. Like small pockets of it, yes. But these people voted in an election where they decided their fate. Mm-hmm. So this is what passes for journalism these days, the New York Times. By the way, Rich Barris provides some context on Twitter on this. So it was really great analysis. He says this region has continually been voting against Ukraine and instead in favor of Russian interest over the years. So let me just give you a little historical context here. This might melt your brain a little bit, especially if you're reading the New York Times. Take a look at your screen. This is 2004. These are the election results from 2004. Okay, Viktor Yanukovych, they're in purple, and Viktor Yushchenko in orange. Oh, I mean, it's right along lines right there. Purple voting for a pro-Russian government, basically, right? So that was 2004, overwhelmingly. Then let's take a look at 2014, which Natalie just mentioned. Again, the lines are clear. Overwhelming support to not support a pro-Western NATO-backed government in Kyiv. They absolutely were supporting, wanted to have their either independence or a Russian centrist, Russian-backed government.
Yes.
This is 2014.
Well, in 2014, their fighting was renewed because of the changeover in government. And they felt like in those regions, this is our chance. Now that the government is something new, we can finally get out of here and separate from these people. They were not allowed, but it has raged bloodily, if I can use that as an adverb, ever since. And
Richard Barroso, like for some context on this, he says, so do referendum margins for Luhansk at 98%, Zaporizhia at 93%, Kherson at 87%, and Donetsk at 99% really look all that different from the previous results that we just showed you? No, they do not. They've been voting pro-Russia by similar margins for a long time. Modest increases after what's happened since 2014 isn't far-fetched. Yeah. So since 2014, what has happened? What has happened since 2014 that may have actually increased their margins in these areas?
Western involvement.
And nonstop bombing, and also a genocide. So thousands of people in the Donbass region killed over the last 8 years. Maybe that would sway them to vote a different way.
Yeah, I would change my political bent.
Like if you were a holdout voter, you're like, I'm not really sure. Am I going to support this Zelensky guy?
And then here comes like, I changed my mind.
Oh, you just blew up the school where our kids go? I don't know if I can support that Zelensky guy anymore. Not sure if I can. But one map I want to show you here that he didn't point out in this tweet, and I want to take, I want to add something to it here, which is this part in green, the green arrow there, which is, of course, Odessa. And notice that in both maps from 2004 and 2014, solid red, solid divisions. So I believe, and we have had military experts on this show, and so that's where I'm getting my opinions on this from, is that Russia will not stop until it has Odessa. So I think that's the next step in this. If they don't back off, it's not going to end with just the Donbass. It's going to move into Odessa, and then Ukraine becomes a landlocked country, wrapped around underneath Moldova, and this country collapses. Poland then, of course, moves in on the western side and annexes part of the western side of Ukraine, and game over.
I just wonder what people who say, no, you have to continue to stop Russia, what do they think would happen if we let sleeping dogs lie right now? If there were peace talks, if we said, okay, that's yours, seems to have been voted for, okay, we all go home now. We coexist peacefully. Why is the Western media screaming so loudly against this? Because of the Putin's a madman narrative and he won't stop here? When he has said, I will stop here. Like, what if we tried? I can't pull that thread from anything that I read. We have to keep going or else.
Well,
right?
It's because where they get the money. So all of the money that funds these networks and news organizations come from these globalists.
Right.
And so CNN has intelligence community people on their shows on a nightly basis. So does CNBC. So does Bloomberg. All of these stations, all of these newspapers, they are paid for by the intelligence community and the deep state and, the military industrial complex.
It's just like Afghanistan. All it was a big money laundering operation, and that's what this is as well. Because they're never going to account for any of this money that's gone over there. We have no idea if it's even making it to Ukraine. It's probably padding the pockets of many elites here in the U.S. We have no idea. But like we found out later in Afghanistan, it was just a big money laundering scheme. So that would be what I think this probably is.
Right. I guess, I'm challenging the people that we see who comment on this show. Like, this is Russian propaganda. Because what, right? Because we want there to be a peace talk table with world leaders around it. That's what we want right now.
How is it?
I know. That's because...
No, I think most of it,
I was just going to say...
Go ahead.
Sorry. I was just going to say it's funny how, like, if you want to talk about peace, like Putin has been painted so bad that they're like, hey, you can't negotiate with terrorists, because that's how they look at Putin. And some people in the chat are like, if you talk about anything peace with Russia, you're a Putin apologist and all that other stuff, which makes zero sense.
Yeah.
You're just like he's the ultimate bad guy.
Well, they've been painting him as the ultimate bad guy for years. Same with Kim Jong-un and, of course, the Ayatollah Khamenei.
Bashar al-Assad.
Bashar al-Assad. And so the idea of peace in Russia, if you don't have an enemy, then you can't convince the American people, I guess, to funnel billions of dollars to the military-industrial complex, right? So you need to have these boogeymen. You need to have this. And I see most people in our chat are, I think, overwhelmingly intelligent. And seems like it. And
yes.
Most people on our show are like absolutely can see what propaganda is being thrown at them by the mainstream media.
Yes, I am not accusing our audience, of course, of anything of the sort. But I still sort of am watching the narrative around social media, and I'm
if you're on
thinking
Twitter,
to myself,
it's a hellhole. If you're on Twitter, people are like, Putin apologist, how dare you? You're on the wrong side of history. It's like, I'm on the wrong side of history, or you just don't even know your history at all.
I did a poll on the channel yesterday, and it was just a simple question: whose agenda do you support right now, Russia or Ukraine? And it was out of 37,000 votes, 86% support Russia.
86% out of 37,000 votes.
37,000 votes.
That's interesting. I want to reiterate that we only support peace at this point, right? So we're not promoting any global power, but at the same time, we do very seriously believe that there are legitimate concerns to not support Ukraine to keep fighting and dying.
And when you look at Western powers who are literally trying to take food, destroying our food supplies and putting people into lockdowns and forcing people to take, pharmaceuticals that we've been covering here on the show. And you see like one country that's being boxed in right now by Western NATO powers and is calling out these. And literally Putin last week called it satanic. He called what the Western governments are doing is satanic. Those were his words. He said that what they're doing with the family, with the family structure is awful. I mean, on and on.
Yes, that cultural piece of it is a completely different ball of wax.
Is it though? I think it's at the heart of it, right? They're scared of it, and the globalists are scared that there's maybe somebody standing up to it. I'm not saying. I actually believe that. I truly believe that they are scared that there are countries like China, that there are countries like like Brazil, there are countries in Africa who are saying absolutely not. We're not going to vote for the World Health Organization to give over all of our of our power, and they're scared of it. They absolutely are scared of it. It crumbles their agenda.
Yeah.
So to your piece about like the mainstream media and the mainstream media narrative, I think this next piece is perfect because the United States is not interested in peace and mainstream media is not interested in peace. Just watch how they frame their questions to these people they have on their channels. So former General David Petraeus, who's suddenly back out there all of a sudden, friends of the Biden administration, friends of the Obama administration, is suddenly being called upon as an ex-CIA director, former four-star general, disaster in Afghanistan, but never mind that, right? We're going to put him all over CNBC. He'll be all over NBC News. We'll put him all over CNN, and we'll get him to tell us why we can't have peace and why we need to basically end Vladimir Putin's regime, as he says it. This was him on CNBC, but watch how this reporter frames the question. Watch.
To ask you, there have been reports that the Ukrainians, in order to secure more U.S. weapons, have said, listen, we would love for the U.S. to have eyes on our targets. We welcome oversight from the United States in terms of what we can hit with the weapons provided us by the United States in terms of Russian targets. Do you think that that's something that the United States would consider doing? Is that even legal?
First of all, we're not going to put boots on the ground. That doesn't mean there may not be other capabilities, or that there may not be some of our closest allies with boots on the ground, everyone working together. Second, in a world of enormous open source intelligence, where everyone has a smartphone that can be loaded on social media and so forth, the access to information is already very, very substantial. Third, it's very publicly known that we have assets that are flying right along the Polish border and have certain reach that's also well known, and other capabilities beyond that that clearly give us, as they say, insights into what's going on the ground, what locations are of various assets and so forth. And it has been publicly acknowledged that we are sharing intelligence with Ukraine through various mechanisms. Beyond that, it's also well known that we are very, very actively supporting the maintenance of those systems that are inside Ukraine when, say, a howitzer goes down, when it becomes inoperative because of maintenance reasons. It's immediately pulled back out, it's repaired right near the border, and then pushed back in. So there's an enormous amount of coordination that's ongoing behind the scenes that has maybe not been fully visible, although, again, almost all this has been laid out publicly in some
But would you say it's a good
form.
idea? I mean, if the Ukrainians are saying, listen, we're going to run every target in Russia that we are focused on by the United States, just so that you feel secure in giving us those weapons?
Yeah, again, we should never get into the tactical or...
It makes it seem like he's like a pit crew on a NASCAR. Like,
that's exactly what we are.
When it stops, we're like, go back, go.
Oh, you got a broken down howitzer? We sent it. It's from the 1980s. We know it's broken down, so we're going to take it. Don't worry. We don't even need to repair it. We just ordered a couple new ones for you, so we can keep the military-industrial complex going. We'll just keep them rotating in.
Well, and also, make no mistake, this guy is on a campaign tour. He's on a tour right now to go sell this because he has to there's no way they would let him talk about this stuff without some kind of approval. And he's on a campaign right now because he's been on several different shows saying the same thing.
Yeah.
And
Getting the same questions.
Should push him, because reports are that we absolutely don't know where the weapons or the money goes. And he's saying, well, there's drones. And there's, social media, and we're pretty, we like that. That feels good. So we'll just keep using that technology. What? That's ridiculous. Hackers have that.
Yeah.
So can't you do a little bit better? But he's like, we feel pretty good about what we can see.
Well, he also talked about boots on the ground, right? He's like, we don't have boots on the ground, right? Like, he's lying right to our faces. We already know the U.S. Special Forces have been there. They've been there for a long time. And he was then he said our closest allies. Clearly, he was referring to Britain, who are also well known to have British Special Forces and multiple forces inside of Ukraine. We've documented it here on the show. We've shown you the videos. We've had different journalists, of course, backing that up. That's all been verifiable. Liz Truss today, the new Prime Minister of Britain, came out and said peace is totally off the table. Like, we're not talking peace. She's the one, of course, that wants nuclear war and is happy to press the button. She says we're all focused right now on Ukraine winning at all costs. That's all that matters. Watch.
We should not give in to those who want a deal which trades away Ukrainian land. They are proposing to pay in Ukrainian lives for the illusion of peace. We will stand with our Ukrainian friends, however long it takes. Ukraine can win, Ukraine must win, and Ukraine will win.
Let's applaud that, yeah, because we don't know what that exactly means. What does it mean for Ukraine to win? Every Ukrainian dead, I guess, is what they plan on. Polish President Duda today telling President Biden that he wants U.S. nuclear weapons brought to Poland.
Okay.
The U.S. has constructed already a brand new military base there, massive military base in Poland, just miles from the border with Ukraine. But yeah, Poland now says it has approached U.S. about sharing nuclear weapons. Poland has spoken to U.S. about bringing these weapons, and they said, after all, we don't have them, and we'd like them to share them. That's literally what he said, almost verbatim quote. Like, sharing is caring. Like, it's like a Daniel Tiger book, like a kid's book. Here, Daniel, share your nuclear weapons with your NATO friends. Make sure you share them. And so we're going to move nuclear weapons now to Putin's back. Again, think about the Cuban Missile Crisis for a second. When Khrushchev puts nuclear weapons in Cuba, we put nuclear weapons, or we put weapons in Turkey, I believe. And so you're in our backyard. We wouldn't stand for it. We declared the Monroe Doctrine. You cannot have weapons in the Western Hemisphere, right? In America, near American borders. You cannot do it. You can't handle it. And this is exactly the same thing that's happening.
Yes. Yeah. Except there is no Monroe Doctrine violation, and we know it, but we're sort of pretending.
Right. So Nate Silver tweeted this afternoon. He said, just a warning. This is Nate Silver, the guy who gets like all the election results wrong. The guy who, he has the 538 blog, and he gets, I don't know. Anyway, he says, he tweeted this. He's a blue check liberal. He said, just a warning. What are the chances of nuclear war stemming from the Ukraine conflict is a rabbit hole you may or may not want to go down, because it will probably occupy a lot of your brain space once you do. Oh.
That's so nice of him to say, that I should not worry about it. I feel like I've just been patted on the butt and told to run along.
Yeah, don't think about it. Just don't even think about it. Michael Tracy tweets, yeah, careful going down this rabbit hole. It may cause you to scrutinize the role of U.S. policy in increasing the chances of nuclear war, and that's not very polite.
No, so don't worry your pretty little head about it, Clayton.
Well, one thing we are worried about is this Nord Stream pipeline, because you can see direct consequences, right, when they destroy the Nord Stream pipeline. And it has a direct consequence on people freezing in Europe and not being able to turn the heat on as a result of it. Will we see another attack on the Nord Stream pipeline? This is the question circulating today, because it looks like one of the major pipes is okay and is actually ready to allow gas flows to start to Germany if Germany will allow it to flow. Now, the people.
So you're telling me that son of a bitch blew up his own pipeline and then fixed it?
Yeah. Yeah. Putin went down there in his little he went right down his little submersible.
The pictures we showed you.
One of our viewers this morning left a comment. I laughed out loud this morning. It was one of the first comments I read on the channel. So I read all your comments, by the way. And it was like, Clayton, don't you understand that they found Russian passports floating in the water above the where the like, joking, of course, right? There was, right. They found ID cards and Russian passports floating above the water where like, oh yeah.
Like it was a kamikaze mission from just regular old civilians.
And you wear your dog
tags.
tags.
Their passport to war.
See, it was Russians after all. Their passports are floating in the seawater right above the hole.
With some bottles of vodka.
Right. And one of those Russian dolls that the little.
Like a nesting doll says, like, we did this.
We did
yeah.
this. When you get to the fourth one inside, it says that. So anyway, will this be attacked again? Will the Nord Stream pipeline be attacked again now that we know that actually they didn't complete the job?
Don't say that.
Well, this is the concern. Russia says, here we go. Do you want to freeze this winter? We've got the gas now. It's ready. Here's a pipe that you guys didn't blow up. Do you want the gas or not? So Germany's got a big question on its hands now, a big problem on its hands. John Kirby, White House lackey under the Biden administration, was asked by Bret Baier about the Nord Stream attack, and he asked him straight out, is it U.S. or U.S. proxy involved in this attack? And just watch John Kirby lie right to us. Watch.
I want to take you to another part of the world and the investigation into this Nord Stream pipeline attack. Did the U.S. or a proxy for the U.S. have anything to do with the explosion on the Nord Stream pipeline?
The United States had nothing to do with it. That's just Russian propaganda and disinformation. Now, we know it was an act of sabotage, but there's an investigation going on right now. I don't think we're going to get into credentialing that in terms of who was responsible. We're going to let the investigators take a look at that, but clearly this was an act of sabotage.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Let me get through
I don't
this
know
question
that body
real fast.
language. Did you know that when somebody lies, you release a hormone called catecholamine, I think is how you pronounce it, and your nose, it literally makes your nose swell and itch. And so Pinocchio was like based on fact.
I don't know what you're talking about.
And so I'm looking at his nose because I'm like, I don't know. Come on. So when someone like touches their nose, and also these are just sort of signs. This is not catecholamines are real. But also, if you just notice, like when you pull down the corners of your mouth because you don't want to emote too much, and like give away. I don't know. This just
Well, he also says U.S. had nothing to do with it, and he quickly moves on. There's an investigation. Look, this is all Russian propaganda, and this is all disinformation. Okay, really? But you also didn't mention in the allies. He quickly skirted past that part of the question. Before we talk about
So you can always tell when the U.S. is involved in something because that's the one thing they don't want investigated. We're like so good about that. Like we want to look into everything. We're going to get to the bottom of all of this. But if they're like, well, we don't want to touch this. We'll just let somebody else deal with it. It's like, yeah, that's probably means that we were
just one of those things.
Yeah,
it's just something. Sometimes these things happen.
So I wanted to bring your attention to this because this happened late this afternoon, right before we went to air, and so Germany is now denouncing Washington's profiteering of the gas that's being. So listen to this. Follow me on this story. It's actually freaking amazing. The U.S. and other friendly gas suppliers now stepped in the wake of the Nord Stream explosion.
Oh, that was nice of them.
And they're selling their U.S. natural gas and liquefied natural gas to Germany, right? So that instead of coming from Russia, this was the plan all along, of course, right? Well, Germany is calling it out, saying these are absolutely, they're increasing their prices. They're profiteering on this. They're sometimes achieving astronomical prices for their gas. So what do you think about this? They're literally we know that this is the case. Germany is now calling out the United States. The German's economic minister, Robert Habeck, said this afternoon that they are price gouging the Germans on natural gas. So we blow up a pipeline and then we'll send it to them.
Yeah, if we're not going to be, form solidarity during a global pandemic, we're about the profit then. You think we're going to do it for gas?
Right. We're not going to send you.
That's not life-threatening.
We're not going to send you extra vaccines that we have. We're not going to send you anything like that.
Right. They can give you the formula. China might get it.
I just find this story stunning. Do you have
okay, but if they actually feel that way, and Russia is saying, but we have the Nord Stream pipeline ready to go, at least one, then does that mean that the appetite to turn this on will change?
Maybe. I mean, if you see the protests that have been hidden in the mainstream media that have been running throughout Berlin, throughout all parts of Germany, to turn on the Nord Stream pipeline, they won't cover this in the mainstream media. It's hard to find it. Certainly not going to see it on CNN. So the people were going to say enough is enough. And if you can get low-cost gas from Germany, which you've already been doing, why would you pay astronomical prices from the price gouging United States who are taking advantage of a situation they created? It's ridiculous.
Yeah.
So anyway, before we talked about North Korea, let's give you an update on the Elon Musk saga on this, the peace agreement. So you'll recall yesterday we told you how Elon Musk laid out a 4-point plan for how we could end this war. Here it is on your screen. Right? Redo elections of annexed regions under UN supervision. Crimea would formally be part of Russia, as it has been since 1783 until Khrushchev's mistake. Water supply to Crimea would be assured, and Ukraine remains neutral, not joining NATO. Twitter exploded, of course. NATO, everyone slammed Elon Musk. Blue check Twitter. All liberals came out and said, what is this guy, crazy? Zelensky slammed him. Members of the Zelensky government slammed him. Putin responded today. So Putin, from Russia's side, responded today to Elon Musk on this issue through his spokesman, Dmitry Peskov. And he told reporters, it is very positive that somebody like Elon Musk is looking for a peaceful way out of the situation, he continued. Compared to many professional diplomats, Musk is searching for ways to achieve peace, and achieving peace without fulfilling Russia's condition is absolutely impossible, he said.
Okay.
So that's from the Kremlin.
And again, this is another indication that Russia actually does want to talk about peace.
Yes, and they have been. And they had actively been working towards it. And oh, by the way, so was Zelensky. What's amazing is how short their memories are in Ukraine, because this 4-point plan is exactly what Zelensky said he was open to back in March. During an interview with David Muir, he specifically answered these questions that David Muir posed to him in an exclusive interview on ABC. Maybe this will actually help jog the memory of all these warmongers a little bit out there. He said he'd relinquished the idea of joining NATO. He said that was already something he put out of his mind, and that he was willing to negotiate on Crimea and Donbass. And he's actively willing to participate in these conversations, of course, until Boris Johnson stepped in and told him to stop any kind of peace talks. Here's David Muir. Watch this interview.
called these conditions to end this war. They said you must change your constitution to give up your wishes to join NATO, that you should recognize Crimea as part of Russia, and that you recognize the independence of those two Russian separatist regions in the east. Are you willing to go along with all three of those conditions? What is your message to Vladimir Putin right now?
First, I'm ready for a dialogue. We're not ready for the capitulation because it's not me. This is about the people who elected me. Regarding NATO, I have cooled down regarding this question a long time ago. After we understood that that NATO is not prepared to accept Ukraine.
When the Kremlin says these three conditions to end the war, that you must give up on joining NATO, recognize Crimea as part of Russia, and recognize the independence of those two separatist regions in the east, to Vladimir Putin, who will get this message from you, you say it's a non-starter, not willing to those three conditions right now?
He didn't say that. Why are you putting words in his mouth? He literally just said he was open to a dialogue. And so you're telling Putin he's not going to do any of these things, right?
He just said, yeah, okay, if it means we stop dying, I think I can talk about that. You mean you're not going to talk about that, right?
Wait, you
just
realize
said you won't.
You're on American television. We cannot allow you to have peace talks.
I want to bring up two things. First of all, you can tell that was edited because he was nodding along in real time. And we know if he's in Ukraine and that guy's in the U.S., we know the latency between us and Portugal. There's no way that the answers would be that quick. And second of all, why isn't he talking like Christian Bale? Well, we need Russia to turn around.
Right.
Like he did in his UN signature.
Well, I think he has come a long way since, like being in the national spotlight. I do feel like...
But he can speak English very well. And so why, again, I always love this sort of theatrics of him speaking Ukrainian and having a translator.
That's all it is.
That's all it is, just the theatrics. Mm-hmm. It's nothing more than that. He's an actor, right? I mean, so that, again, let me just play the end of that, where he specifically talks about those regions. Do we have it still?
I'm talking about security guarantees. I think that items regarding temporary occupied territories and unrecognized republics that have not been recognized by anyone but Russia, these pseudo-republics, but we can discuss and find a compromise on how these territories will live on.
Oh!
And again, at the time, the peace offering was not even full annexation of these regions, but independence.
Independence and security.
Right? You could have not lost them altogether.
So again, this was March. But they don't want you to remember this. They don't want you to remember this interview at all. And you can just see how David Muir is like, but you really don't want to be doing that, right? You want to send a clear message to Putin. It's just unbelievable. But that's the short-sightedness of this. Do you want to bring us up to speed? So, we've got this disaster now potentially unfolding, and I think they're all connected. I think what's happening in North Korea, what's happening in China is a direct relationship to what United States and NATO are doing in Russia right now. And I think with watching North Korea launch these missiles over the past few days is a way of testing the American resolve. And I think it's like saber rattling, saying, oh, you guys are distracted over there. We're going to start testing some stuff.
Right. This is the 23rd time that North Korea has set off a missile launch. It went straight over
this year.
Yes, this year. I apologize. It went straight over Japan. People in Japan woke up at 7:30 in the morning with an alert on their a text alert on their phone saying, shelter in place, don't go outside, because it went, whew, right? It did not hit any civilians. No, there was no deaths. But again, there was no warning. And a lot of times North Korea says we're going to do some test launches. And so the rest of the region has some warning. They did not get that in this instance. And so of course, all the Western powers released their statements saying we strongly condemn this. We don't like it. Stop doing this. But that's been happening for years now. And so the United States, along with South Korea, did send up flares of their own, launch at least 5 missiles into the air, as what they're calling a show of strength. Just like, hey, we can do that too. This is fun.
Here we go. Let's test some of these things out. What's amazing too is if you look at the coverage of this, when Trump was president, right, It was a chance for the liberal media to show weakness in Trump. And CNN went wall to wall with coverage. So this afternoon, take a look. This is CNN.com right now. This is the front page of CNN.com. And they even they have no coverage of this missile launch. Nothing. So when Trump was president, it was all over the place, right? It was a chance for liberal media to show weakness in Trump.
I was wondering, is it because we have something like nuclear fatigue? We got to keep you focused on the nuclear possibility from the Russia-Ukraine conflict. Like, don't pay attention to the rest of Asia. We can't be looking there.
What's amazing, I don't know. I think about it. Yeah, let us know in the commentary in the chat as we're watching this, because so you have CNN, you have other mainstream. Literally, it's like no coverage of this. Maybe a little nugget. That's it. They're not even talking about it. That literally air raid sirens. People in Tokyo were sheltering in place because of what the hell was happening from North Korea. Was this China telling North Korea, like their little lapdog, like, hey, launch some missiles. We gotta rattle the Americans and the NATO right now as a precursor to moving on Taiwan. Like this is all eyes on Taiwan, guys. This is still the major point of all of this, right? But people get distracted and they forget about it. So CNN, no coverage of this at all. No coverage of this at all. But when Trump was president, 2017, they even sent a reporter, CNN did, to North Korea to talk about North Korea's massive new weapons capabilities. Watch this. This is inside of North Korea with a CNN reporter. Watch.
I just walked out of a meeting a few minutes ago, Becky, with a government official here who gave us some insight into how this missile was developed. You may recall back in August, North Korea launched a ballistic missile from a submarine. It was a major development because it allowed the North to basically pull a submarine up to an enemy's shores, launch the missile, and they could strike targets in cities.
So here he is inside of North Korea. Like,
how'd he get there?
Now they don't even have coverage on their website. Of these launches, but they're sending reporters there to cover it because, Trump is weak. And then when he goes and actually meets with Kim Jong-un and then no missiles are launched, right? He's threatening to launch missiles, and then Trump goes there and says, don't even try it because our missiles are way bigger. We have way more of them. Don't even try it. And actually hostilities stopped, right? And it got tamped down. And then the liberal media was like, how dare you go and meet with Kim Jong-un and talk to the guy? Like,
right.
What is the matter with you?
Well, in CNN's defense, they're broke now, so they can't send reporters correspondence to North Korea.
Yeah, because North Korea can't afford to put them up in a hotel or anything. Like they're
no.
Yeah. Well, speaking of broke, the United States Army right now. You think about how stretched we are. And again, this is an opportunity maybe for North Korea. This is an opportunity for China. They're seeing things happening. They're seeing what the United States is dealing with, and they're looking at these recruitment goals. The U.S. Army, according to the numbers from August, and I'll show you the most recent numbers, the Army has so far recruited only about half the soldiers it hoped for in fiscal year 2022.
Jeez.
So huge numbers down. And then here's the recruitment goals. This came out this week. The U.S. Army falls 25% short of its recruiting goal. They just can't get people. And so they're having the Air Force, Marine Corps, Navy are dipping into pools of delayed entry applicants to meet these goals right now.
And so it makes you wonder, because we do have, we have a 12-year-old son who has an American passport. Would they start conscripting? How long will this go on, right? Will it affect our children? Of course, this is a self-referencing thought, but it's my first thought.
Well, yeah, but then you have to say, what threat is America under? We're creating these proxy wars. How many wars do we need to be in? At what point do Americans say enough is enough? Bring these people home. Get out of Somalia. Get out of Syria. Get out of Ukraine.
Those things are only said on presidential debate stages. They're never really said seriously in Washington.
Unfortunately.